Laura Kinney, aka X-23, was created by Craig Kyle and first introduced in Season 3 of the popular WB Kids cartoon X-Men Evolution on August 2nd, 2003. She is one of a handful of characters first created for an animated show that were brought into comic canon. X-23 was brought into the world of Marvel Comics shortly after in December for NYX's third issue. Her portrayal in this series was minor at best, shown as a barely verbal prostitute that looks nothing like her animated counterpart. She didn't return to comics until nearly a year later in October 2004 for issue 451 of Uncanny X-Men. This time around, she was a little more verbal and looked closer to her animated version, but seemed unaware of who Wolverine was, nor did he seem to know her. She tagged along for a few more issues under the wing of the newly resurrected Psylocke, but soon disappeared again. In January of 2005, X-23 was given a series of her own, and her backstory was rewritten. Although it followed the major points of her X-Men Evolution origin, her character was further fleshed out and given a name, Laura Kinney, though it would be a while before she actually started using it. The Origins series lasted for 6 issues, ending in May of the same year. She wasn't picked up for her own series again until December of 2006. In the meantime, following the events of House of M, she was brought into New X-Men, with a single conversation with Wolverine that essentially retconned her first appearance in Uncanny X-Men and alluded to events that wouldn't play out until her second solo series. Fun fact, Wolverine first introduces her as his sister, not his daughter, which as his genetic clone is probably closer to the truth. In the world of Heroclix, however, X-23 was first introduced in 2004 for Monsters and Mutations. Since then, she's had 7 figures in the game, including her most recent release as All-New Wolverine. Let's take a closer look and see just how comic accurate she is.
So thankfully, X-23 is one of those characters who, while she's been in the comics for over 10 years, she's kind of, I don't want to say underclicked, but we don't have many versions of her. So it's actually kind of easier to analyze her comic accuracy when you only have 7 versions of a character to look at, as opposed to a character, say, like Iron Man or Superman or Wolverine, who are all topping the high end of how many versions of those characters we've had over the last 15 years. So the first time we got to see her here is Mutations and Monsters. I believe this was back in 2005. And this was, I believe, the second or third set to ever have white powers. So they were still kind of working out how they wanted these to be represented in the game. It was still a very new concept. They hadn't really explored what they could do with it. And so a lot of these earlier iterations here, this one and the next one, are underrepresentations of what this character can do. And even when you look at her dial here, we have Leap, Climb, her special white power, Super Senses, and now this is more indicative of the time, but her stats are 8 movement, 9 attack, 16 defense, and 1 damage with Close Combat Expert. And that special power there is X-23 can use Stealth when she occupies hindering terrain and makes a close combat attack, modify her attack by +1. So she wants to be in hindering, she wants to be attacking without people seeing her, and pretty much that's all you get out of it. And these used to be our little background blurbs of where these characters came from and a little bit about themselves, which was actually a really cool thing that they used to do with the old cards. Now, even when you look through her dial, these stats are still pretty low. She picks up Flurry, but her defense goes down to a 15 on her second click. Then she picks up Combat Reflexes, and at the tail end, we have Regeneration there. And she's only like 5 clicks, I think. Hold on. 6 maybe. The older dials were longer, but had really low stats. Whereas, like I said, this was part of the old way that the game was made. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 clicks of health. Now, as far as comic representation there, the very first time that you see X-23 in this costume, the funny thing about this is that this isn't like a costume, like a uniform that she'd be wearing. She was a waitress at a bar, and it was a superhero themed bar, and everybody that worked there wore like a superhero outfit. And this is actually a rare, not well used older Wolverine outfit that they put her in as kind of like a joke. So this wasn't really any kind of costume that she wore herself actively. This was a uniform for wherever she worked. But yeah, so when we cut to the stats are kind of standard for at the time. But if we were to take this and compare it to a Wolverine at the time, we're going to see lower stats than the Wolverine. And one of the things that you'll find my biggest gripe about having X-23 made in Clix is that her stats should not be lower than Wolverine's. It is noted multiple times, even in this comic alone that this is from, that she is a faster, stronger, deadlier version of Wolverine. Her stats should be higher, and they're always, for whatever reason, lower. So as far as comic representation for that one, good for the time that it came out, but still not really showcasing her stats should be higher for that one. So the next time we see her is here. This is a Web of Spider-Man, and this is her in her X-Force costume. So comic-wise, this would have been after House of M, after Decimation, after Messiah Complex, where the X-Men have pretty much disbanded, and Scott Summers has become jaded, and he's like, okay, well, there are jobs out there that need to get done that the X-Men can't do, and he forms this deadly version of X-Force to go and do all of the wet work for the X-Men. So she's part of that team there, and that's where this uniform comes in as more stealthy. There's also a Wolverine, Deadpool, and Warpath from this run of X-Force in this set, and they all have matching uniforms. When it comes down to stats-wise, when we look at it, we have stealth. Her attack is where it should be, at an 11 there with Blaze Claw's Fangs to bring out her damage output, which is fantastic. That's where it should be. Her defense is still low with super senses. Again, still kind of indicative of that time in Heroclix. And then you move around and she drops down in attack and she picks up Battle Fury. And then she's got Flurry from her stealth and regen for she's stiff. She's stiff. Oh no. Regen at the very end there for 2 clicks, I believe, and then she's dead. So again, a smaller dial. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 clicks of health, which at 60 points isn't actually that bad when it comes down to it. But her stats, like really the defense should just be a little bit higher. The attack is where it should be. And the movement, she's like faster than Wolverine, but not super fast. Like you're not going to see a 12 movement or anything out of her when it comes down to representation. Now, this one didn't have any special powers, but did have a trait. This was something that they did touch on that has always been part of her as a character ever since they did the background story, her own comic line where they kind of rewrote her origin story. And that's the trigger scent at the beginning of the game. Choose an opposing character. X-23 modifies her attack value by +2 when attacking that character. It's a decent representation of what that is in the comics, where they made this thing as part of her where if she smells a certain scent, it's actually a manufactured scent that they created and they put it on people to make her go crazy. She does her Berserker Rage, which Wolverine is known for, where he kind of just blacks out and goes out and kills things. So with her trigger scent, it could pretty much be anything, but it is something manufactured, so that is why you get to choose which character you go after. So it's a decent representation of that part of that character, but it's still only really showing one aspect of her, which you'll find that happens in Clix, especially when you, when they want to represent a certain era, like here's her X-Force era. So now she's stealthy and you have her trigger scent to go off of. So really for me, the only thing that bothers me about this iteration of her is that her defense should just be a little bit higher, but not too horrible. I wouldn't say the best comic accurate one. And we don't see her pop up again for a long time until we get to the Deadpool set. Now there's 2 of her in the Deadpool set. I'm going to put the card down for a second so we can look at the sculpt. And this is actually a duo character. So this is her with Wolverine. I'm going to say her brother. I touched on that in the intro, is that like they're not father and daughter, but they have like a father-daughter relationship that kind of grows over the years. And now if you see them in the comics nowadays, she will like refer to Wolverine as her dad. And he's had this whole kind of father influence on her. Now this unfortunately is one of those weird dials. Let's see if I can get a good angle on that, where the sculpt is beautiful, but it kind of blocks being able to see the stats. So here we have like charge, 9 movement, 12 attack, which is fantastic, 17 defense, which is where I want it to be, 3 damage with leadership. Now the problem with this being a comic accurate one, when it comes down to it, is that this is a duo figure. So you're not so much seeing a representation of X-23 as you are seeing a representation of Wolverine as well. Now these are stats and powers and stuff that we're used to seeing on Wolverine, but not something that we had seen in the past 2 iterations of X-23. So we come down to it and they have 7 clicks of health. There. So same kind of standard powers. We get the leap climb, we get this blaze claws fangs, we have regeneration at the end of the dial. They pick up super senses at one point, and the charge top dial there. Now again, this is her X-Force days, or you can see that Wolverine is in his X-Force outfit as well. Now the points on these guys, if I can show it to you guys, a little high, they're 168. Whereas this kind of suffers from that, there was a weird point formula issue at the time that Deadpool came out, where we were getting a lot of things shoved into a lot of characters, and it kind of boosted their points, where they're fun to play, but in a 300-point team, they're more than half of your team, but their powers do kind of make up for that. So they are just like, they have improved movement, ignore, hindering, which is actually fantastic, something that didn't show up earlier because we didn't really have the improved movements yet. They have a trait, Wolverine and X-23 can use sidestep and stealth. Unhindered lines of fire drawn to them during an opponent's turn are blocked unless they have 2 action tokens or adjacent to an opposing character not in its starting click, which is fantastic because when they're stealth, you can't see them. When they're not in stealth, you can't see them. This was a fantastic representation of them both being like these top dog secret agents, assassins, where people didn't see them coming. They're not supposed to be able to see them coming. So I thought that was an absolutely fantastic trait, but it probably also skyrocketed their point value. And then they have an attack power. They can use Blaze Claw's Fangs and Flurry. When using Blaze Claw's Fangs, their minimum D6 result is 3. If they have hit character twice in a turn, they may use Incapacitate as free action targeting that character. So it's kind of like a tag team double attack, which is great. They're always doing a large amount of damage, which when it comes down to super assassins that have adamantium claws, they should always be doing a huge amount of damage. So I really enjoyed that. And then they have damage power, which they have on their clicks with regen. And like, I think it intersperses in between their dial. Give them a free action and roll a d6. On the result of 2 to 5, heal them 1 click. On result of 6, heal them 2. So that works on their healing factor. Something I touched on earlier with X-23 being like a souped up, better version of Wolverine is that her healing factor is actually even more advanced than Wolverine's. When she first started in the comics, it was kind of, they weren't really sure where they were going to go with that, and so they had it a little bit lower. But as she progressed in her own solo comics, it's noted multiple times that she heals faster, and she, especially in these X-Force comics, she's like you're slow, old man. She constantly called Wolverine old man. She tells him he's slow. She tells him he's not good enough because he is the older model. He's the older version of her, and everything that he does, she can do better and faster and stronger. So the next one that shows up in Deadpool is the Power Cosmic X-23. Now this one it's kind of cheating when it comes down to being comic accurate, because it is technically comic accurate. It is X-23 possessed by the Unipower, which happened in a single issue of her comic. She was only really this form for a few panels. Now she does go back to it later on. They kind of call on her because apparently it's very rare to find someone that can bond with the Unipower. But this one's a toss-up for me because, yeah, this is probably the most comic accurate X-23, but it's only comic accurate because it's Cosmic X-23 and it's comic accurate to that one single issue of her being possessed by the Unipower. But then you get the cosmic stuff here. So you get Running Shot, Pulse Wave, Invincible, going through her dial. She gets Hypersonic, Impervious, and then goes down to Charge in the regen and Prob at the end, and she's got 9 clicks for 275 points. Again, this coming with like that weird point formula where a lot of things were shoved in there, and it really, really brought up the point value a little bit more than what you would see nowadays in Clix, where they've kind of, feels like they've evened out or at least fixed the point formula a little bit. She does have a trait here, Cosmic Healing Factor. Give Cosmic X-23 a free action and roll a d6 that can't be re-rolled on result of 4 or 5. Heal her 1 click on the result of 6, heal 2 clicks. So it's very similar to the power that she's got with the Wolverine duo. And it's kind of just her healing factor boosted up from the Power Cosmic. She does have an attack power. She can use Blaze Claw's Fangs and then add half of her target's damage value to the result of the d6. Again, like I said, it is comic accurate, but it's not X-23 when it comes down to it. This is comic accurate for the Unipower. As you can see, it happened during like a Captain Universe X-23 crossover where she got possessed by it. So that one just feels strange to me when it comes down to it, where I don't want to put that in my column as, yes, most comic accurate X-23. So the next time we saw her was the next time we got an X-Men set, which was the Uncanny X-Men. Now there's 2 versions of her. There is the Fast Forces and the main set, and the Fast Forces uses the Clix effects base, which was something that they added in for a couple of sets, and I don't think it was as well received as they hoped it would have been. So looking at her her Fast Forces one, so this is the uniform that she was given when she joined part of the All New X-Men, which was the time displaced original 5 X-Men came back and they all kind of had the same uniform. So there is a set of those guys in this set that have very similar outfits to this, because they were like, oh, we're a matching team outfit. Now she's only 50 points, which, I mean, when it comes down to it, she shouldn't be high in points, but I've also made this argument for Wolverine. Wolverine shouldn't be high in points either. But when you want to balance out making a comic accurate, power accurate character, they're going to be a little higher in points. So this, you'll see she's got the charge, she's got the Blaze Claw's Fangs, she's got the defense there with toughness. Absolutely fantastic. The stats are where they should be when it comes down to it. She's got the 9 movement, which makes for a 5 square charge. She's got the 11 attack with Blaze Claws, so she can do a little bit more than that 2 printed damage. And she's got the toughness, which is a little more indicative of her healing factor in a way, because like she's not any tougher than anybody else, but she'll take a hit and keep going, and just kind of go. And go. And that was actually a big storyline thing in this run of comics, was that after Wolverine died in the comics, and she kind of wanted to, like, show that she could be the new Wolverine and show that she could live up to his legacy. She was really, really pushing herself hard and hard and hard and throwing herself into situations that were needlessly dangerous. And there is actually a really interesting panel conversation between her and Angel, where she's on fire. And he's just like, you know, just because you can heal from all of this stuff doesn't mean you have to. That conversation eventually led to her getting body armor, because she's essentially wasting time healing instead of fighting. So just because she can heal from all of these stuff doesn't mean she absolutely has to. So there's a very interesting part of the comic. Actually, that whole relationship between her and Angel is fantastic, and I do suggest to anyone that enjoys X-Men to read All New X-Men and then X-Men Blue Team, where that storyline continues, and of course All New Wolverine. So we see she moves on to combat reflexes and then regen, and she's got 5 clicks. So this, especially being a Fast Forces, this is supposed to be kind of like a glimpse into the character, a very easy, simple version of the character, which it really is. It's a decent representation of her. The stats are where they should be, the powers are what they should be, and she has the right amount of health for her points. Now, the thing that they did add into this to use the slash marker was her trait Let 'em Bleed. When an opposing character takes damage from her close attack, after actions resolve, you may attach the slash marker to that character, removing it from anywhere else. When the character with the slash marker is given an action token, deal it 1 penetrating damage. When that character heals or clears action tokens, remove the slash marker. Now, this was something that they gave to everybody that got a slash marker, so this isn't really indicative of her. More it is that it's like if you're playing an RPG and your character now has a bleeding effect. They kind of just gave that to all characters that would give a bleeding effect. So it's not so much X-23's power as it is, hey, we want to use the slash marker. So it's, I don't want to say it's gimmicky, but it's more of how many of these characters can we add this to. Like Wolverine gets it, Katana from DC gets it, like a lot of characters get it, and they're just like, hey, let's just do this for this character, because it fits for her when it comes down to it. And that's a nice little good glimpse, good job at being comic accurate when it comes down to it, and to fit into that niche or that that slot of the Fast Forces, easy to learn, start out kind of character. When we see her in the main set, she's actually a little more indicative of being a leader of the all new X-Men there. So she's still in the same uniform. So this is this is her as a leader. So she's 100 points, and she's supposed to add in kind of like the focal point of the all new X-Men, because at one point Cyclops is laid up and he becomes more of the strategic leader. In the background, he's in a wheelchair for a while because he broke his leg, and X-23 kind of takes point on the team as being the leader there. So we have a bunch of white powers. She's indomitable, which is fantastic. It's the first time we've seen her on her own, indomitable, which makes so much more sense because, as I mentioned, she will just go, 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 essentially killing herself to make sure that she's still being a worthy part of the team. So the stats are pretty much where they should be. Movement's a little bit higher. And now we're seeing Empower, which is the first time we've seen this. And they like to give this to kind of close combat characters that are leadership characters rather than actually giving them leadership. It's like, okay, by fighting beside you, I'm going to make you better. So that's how they kind of represent Empower there. And then she goes down to, we get Sidestep, which it's all right. And then Stealth with Exploit Weakness. Honestly, if we could make a character like this and Wolverine would be the same, like she would just be all white powers and it'd be like she had not so much a pick power, but she's going to have like half of the pack because of what she can actually do. So we get Exploit Weakness, Stealth. We go down to Blade's Claws and Super Senses and Perplex. Perplex is really interesting. I actually want to see what their okay, so the flavor text on her Perplex is that she's unpredictable, which, sure, okay. And then kind of switches around. So she's got a decently deep dial. She's got 6 clicks, which is still kind of high for 100 points, but yeah. This was at the time where we were just starting to get the point formula evened out as to where it should be. And I mean, look at the sheer amount of powers that she does go through for 100 points compared to how little we got power-wise, like different power-wise for these guys at almost 200 points. When we look at her actual powers here, she's got her healing factor trait. When she clears action tokens, you may heal her click. Fantastic. Especially with her being indomitable, you're probably going to get her double token for a while. So allows her to take a breath and clear and heal. And then she's got charge and flurry. Fantastic. Her attack power there is Blades, Claws, Fangs. When she does, if the result is 1 or 2, once per turn, you may re-roll the roll. So kind of just showing that, yeah, she's gonna do damage. If you roll too low, re-roll it, because like this is, like I said, trained from birth, super assassin, super agent. Like, she's gonna deal damage, especially with the adamantium claws. With X-23, because she was given the claws when she was about 13, 11 to 13, when they started actually putting her out on missions. Unlike Wolverine, she doesn't have a full adamantium skeleton, which honestly should make her faster than Wolverine, but that's not really here or there because they do give her a decent amount of movement lately. But yeah, so the only thing that her claws and her toe claws do get the adamantium coating, so they are just as deadly as Wolverine's claws when it comes down to it. And then she has no special defense power or damage powers there. So not bad when it comes down to it. The special powers are definitely finally getting there. If you take this and compare it to, like I said, the original one, where the only thing she had was that stealth and attacking from stealth to give her extra attack. Like we're definitely finally getting there when it comes to giving her the special powers that she needs, and without it topping out her point value too hard. So we finally have our last version of X-23, and that is the all-new Wolverine. So we finally see her in her uniform, which unfortunately she's no longer going to be using now that Wolverine's coming back into the comics, and she's going back to just being X-23. Womp womp. So we see her here as all-new Wolverine, and I've already mentioned the all-new Wolverine comic that this is from. So this is after Logan has died, and she's taken up the mantle, and she's trying to live out the Wolverine legacy. So here we see her. She is 100 points. She has charge, blades. Her movement's a little lower than what we saw with the previous ones, where the Fast Forces had a 9, the main set had a 10. Now we're back down to 8. Not horrible. Anywhere between 8 and 10 is kind of good for the character. We do have that nice high attack with 11. Her defense should be around 17. It starts with combat reflexes, which isn't horrible, but she's also got that perplex. What do they call her perplex this time? I have sisters? Yeah, that would be perplexing. That is part of a storyline in All New Wolverine that they kind of start off that series with, is that they find out that she's not the only clone anymore. But with that perplex, she can pretty much move her stats around where it needs to be, and then it pretty much stays here until she loses charge and perplex, and then finishes off with Battle Fury and regen, and near her end, her attack goes up, which is fantastic. This is something that we've seen happen with Wolverine before, and it's indicative of that never give up, never die, never surrender sort of attitude that she does have, where she will keep pushing herself regardless of how hurt she is. She will just get deadlier. So I think that's fantastic there. And then we end off there, and she is 6 clicks as well. Now she does have some fantastic traits to go with this, on top of having a great dial. So we see unexpected team ups. Now she, much like Wolverine, she has shown up on a lot of different teams. She was on X-Force, she was on New X-Men, she was on All New X-Men, she was on her own, she teamed up with her clone sisters, so she's a little bit all over the place. So she does have keywords: All New X-Men, Circle of 4, Weapon X, X-Force, X-Men, and then she can take and copy the keywords of any one person during force construction, which allows you to make a theme team with her regardless of what your theme team is. Her second trait there is Jonathan the Unstoppable Wolverine. This is a character that was introduced in the all-new Wolverine comics, where one of her sisters has essentially adopted a wild Wolverine. And without getting Gabby in actual Clix to have Jonathan with, we're getting Jonathan with Laura here. And then he comes out, and part of his thing is that, like, it's really hard to kill this Wolverine. So he has a thing where the first time he dies, he doesn't actually die. And then we also see her healing factor. Now, this is probably the best representation, I'd say, of her healing factor. I would probably, personally, if I was to design it, add it into the other one where she... when she clears. She has one where she clears. There's one where there's a better Wolverine one where just he heals every other turn because of where it is on his dial. Anyways, at the beginning of your turn, you may roll a d6 and add the number of action tokens on All New Wolverine on the final result of 5 or more. Heal her 1 click. It's actually really easy to get this to go off, especially with her, again, being indomitable, having those 2 tokens. Essentially, you get a chance between, I think you only fail on a 1. Yeah, you only fail her on a 1 or 2, because you're adding 2 to the result anyways. So it's easy enough to get her healing, and it's good, like, team her up with a good TKer or a carrier, and you can get her out of the fight, let her heal up, and come back in. I've done this many times, actually, playing her, where even lower in her dial, where she still has fantastic stats, but she can't really move and attack anymore. One good heal at the beginning of her turn gets her back to that charge. So it's a great way of kind of showing her ability to heal. Now, it's never really gonna get it 100% right, and I'm sure any major comic book fan that has their favorite character will feel this way, that you can't really get the character 100% right, but you can get it most of the way there, because you do have to take into consideration game design. So, I mean, you can't have her constantly be using free regen every turn. That's not, it doesn't really work in the game. So you get something like this where it's like the next best thing. And it's easier for her to heal the more that she's pushing herself. So when it comes down to it, as far as, is it comic accurate? Well, I've mentioned multiple times which versions and where we see it from comics, what could be better on each different one. And when it comes down to a good reflection of the character, and like I said, never be 100%, but a good reflection of the character, I would say that these two are definitely there. Now this one, obviously, you get that extra healing, you get that push, she's indomitable. It's a really, really good reflection of how far this character has come in the last 10 or so years that she has been in comics, and where she's actually kind of come to the forefront, especially with the Logan movie that came out, where now more audiences know who this character is. And unlike some of the other kind of switch up all new Marvel characters, she's been around for a really long time. And now she's kind of in the spotlight. And this is a great representation of her. But this one's also really good too when it comes down to what they want to do with this character, with it being a Fast Forces character where it is going to be low points, but it ticks all of the right boxes. The only thing that is going to put the all-new Wolverine over top of the Uncanny X-Men X-23 is that the Fast Forces one doesn't have an ongoing healing. So these guys are definitely in the top, but I think that extra possible healing every turn does put, this is the most comic accurate version of X-23.